Ever wanted to get that podcast off the ground? Ever got stuck wondering how to get it done? Well, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First off, it's completely free. You heard that right. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and much, much more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. So as soon as you start recording, get your ads in place, you start making that money. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today.
It was all the dread love, it's the Brooklyn way.
No man in the sky intervenes.
You can't handle the truth.
An abomination.
You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Where did that bring you?
Introduce a little anarchy.
This is the Kayatic Dreams Podcast.
Upset the established order and everything becomes...
This is the Kayatic Dreams Podcast. Welcome to the Kayatic Dreams Podcast. This is your host, AJ. Today I want to take a little deep dive, go back in time and review the Green Lantern film from 2011. So the reason behind this revisit of this movie was it's a crazy time. It's a crazy time in DC and the universe as a whole, comic book industry as a whole. You know, these characters are starting to be more prominent than ever in movies and any other medium. Honestly, they're taking over. With the recent news of release the Snyder Cut being actually released by AT&T, HBO Max, and Warner Brothers collectively, there's been a lot of rumors. There's been a lot of news coming out recently, and a lot of those rumors have to do with Green Lantern. Now, in the Justice League movie that was released by Joss Whedon, he still maintained a presence of a Green Lantern in the old war scene that they filmed, but he cut out what was intended to be there. I'm not sure if it was 100% cut out or if Snyder didn't get to film those scenes, but it was Snyder's original intent to not only have a Green Lantern appear in the old war, but also cameo as a part of the Justice League that was formed in the film. Not only that, the movie was supposed to spin off the Green Lanterns and start their own film franchise within the DCEU. With the reception of Justice League coming out, with Joss Whedon completely destroying that film, they took a step back and they looked at their entire slate, and Green Lantern, along with Cyborg and Flash, which just recently got confirmed to be in production, they all got either pushed back or canceled. Green Lantern was definitely, a victim of that situation. With that being said, currently, there's plans to have a Green Lantern episodic show on HBO Max, the same platform that is releasing the Snyder Cut. There's also rumors of the Snyder Cut including scenes to help these spin-offs to, help just start more universes and redirect the franchises that they put on screen. Zack Snyder's original vision of having Green Lanterns in the movie, Snyder himself has confirmed that not only did he have a Green Lantern in the old war and a cameo, but it was more than one lantern. So the old rumors for the original Green Lantern Corps film was that it was going to be a lethal weapon buddy cop film, which honestly makes the most sense. We have 4 major lanterns of Earth in comic book history, and with Hal Jordan already being visited in a previous film, I believe the plan was a Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart team-up film, with obviously Hal Jordan being the leading Green Lantern and Jon Stewart being the rookie in the situation. So a lot of traction, a lot of news surrounding Green Lantern in general. Now, the biggest news and the catalyst, the reason for me even doing this episode, the biggest cameo that they're saying is going to happen in Justice League, the Zack Snyder's version of Justice League, is Ryan Reynolds returning to cameo in the film. Now, there's rumors saying that Ryan Reynolds is in talks with Warner Brothers. On the Marvel side, Deadpool was his, bread and butter. It was his baby. And with the acquisition of Fox, Disney now owns the rights to Deadpool's movies. And with the tone of Deadpool being rated R, it's definitely a long shot that we get a Deadpool 3. And if so, how much will the tone of the films be tampered with? Deadpool is strictly rated R, heavy on the humor, heavy on the sexual humor, the homosexual jokes, and, very gore-filled. So I don't know if Disney is going to take that tone. But now is the perfect time for Warner Brothers to swoop in, not only bring the Green Lantern universe that they already had established into their new universe, but fix the mistakes and continue the story, hopefully, of what we had in the original Green Lantern film. Now, Ryan Reynolds is said to be interested in the cameo, but with a more serious take on Hal Jordan on Green Lantern. These rumors have not been confirmed as of yet, so take them with a grain of salt. But it gets the mind working, gets the gears moving, and if Ryan Reynolds will return, that means the lore established in the first film is going to be key in the DCEU moving forward, unless they go with the multiverse theory and this Hal Jordan is just a different version of Hal Jordan from a different universe. Now, with the major Infinite Crisis event that happened last year on the CW Arrowverse, they actually introduced the multiple Earths and brought in every medium of DC Comics. So whether it was television, movies, anything, it now became canon. It became a part of the multiverse. So whether we get the Green Lantern continuation from the Green Lantern 2011 film, or whether this is a new take on Hal Jordan, just with Ryan Reynolds still at the starring role of Hal Jordan, that's yet to be determined. So we'll find that out down the line. A lot of these rumors will get cleared up or completely discredited, and I'll keep you guys updated on that. So without further ado, let's get into our Green Lantern review. Now, to go back, let me put my mindset in 2011. Now, when Green Lantern was announced, I was extremely hyped. I was definitely behind the franchise. I definitely, enjoyed all the stills and photos that they released prior to release. I was definitely all in. The comparison they gave Green Lantern was to the Star Wars movie universe, as far as, the alien diversity and multiple planets, etc. So they were trying to really make this the next big space universe, space story. So did they succeed on that? I would say yes and no. I mean, they did expand on Oa, and they gave some lore of Green Lantern's history, and they explained the suit, the ring, the Guardians. They did the proper building blocks, but I don't feel like they traversed enough of the universe to really compare it to a Star Wars franchise. In Star Wars, we see at least 4 to 5 different planets each movie. And in Green Lantern 2011, it was basically Earth, Oa, and maybe a planet or so that was unnamed. It basically was just plot armor to push the story forward. So when Green Lantern opens, we basically see Al-Mansur, which is the Lantern who was in possession of Hal Jordan's ring. He's on a mission in space, eventually discovering that Parallax is active from his prison. He was released from his prison. Parallax attacks, and Al-Mansur goes on a escape mission to land on Earth. He gets, mortally injured and finally lands on Earth. This is when the story shifts to Hal Jordan. Now, when we see Hal Jordan, I admit, Ryan Reynolds is known for his comedy and his specific form of humor. And I feel like a lot of people's criticisms was the comedic elements or that side of Ryan Reynolds' personality shining through. But as someone who has watched multiple Ryan Reynolds movies throughout the years, big fan of a couple of them in particular, I can honestly say he scaled back on this. And I feel like whatever was given on his behalf was whatever was directed of him, was demanded of him. So I would say take the criticism off of Ryan Reynolds, because at the end of the day, he really did play the role to a good extent. Ryan Reynolds is good in reading what he's thinking and feeling based on the expressions of his face. And he did a lot of that. Like, he was just like Hal was in the beginning, a little arrogant, misguided, not responsible. And that's basically the character work that they were giving him. And basically you see him late for everything, questioning everything. He's the bad boy in the Air Force. And you see him pretty much go against what they want him to do, and he's known as this fuck up that it has immense talent, has a great future, but just doesn't know how to embrace his past trauma and just grow up as a man to become the person that everyone else sees. So in the very beginning, we see him as a child, his friendship with Carol Ferris and the love of his father, him witnessing his father's death, hit all the beats, all the elements of a Green Lantern story. So I'll speed along through this. I won't give a exact detail of the entire film, but the death of his father was a catalyst for everything he did. He became a pilot. He was chasing that same adrenaline rush. He was chasing that same feeling his father used to have. And his father was his biggest hero. But the same way his father died, it seemed like that's what he was chasing. Like, he wanted to know what his father was going through in those moments. He ends up being the test flight simulation for Ferris Air, which were selling high military aircraft that didn't need any human element. So he went out his way to show them that not having a human in pilot of these vehicles, it's probably in detriment to what they're trying to achieve. So, he's also cocky. So it comes off like it was just him trying to show off, but he ends up catching anxiety and that fear of losing his life like his father. He ends up choking and crashing the plane. This is the catalyst for, a few enemies throughout the film, and his relationship with Carol Ferris. She's the love interest that is not with him because he refuses to grow up or refuses to embrace the responsibility. And Carol keeps him from being suspended or fired. And, fired in this case. She suspends him to protect his career. But he made enemies in his own camp. After this happens and he loses, his position for a while, that's when Al-Mansur comes in play, and he ends up at the crash site of Al-Mansur, receives the ring, and the rest is pretty much history. So the story, people complain, I put a post up to a group that, is very passionate about movies, and I asked, with Green Lantern rumors going around, what made or broke this film for you guys? And it was a couple key points. The CGI was mentioned a lot. Some people said the story, and the majority of everyone said the story was decent enough, but the real issue were the villains and the CGI work. So let's focus on that. As far as the story goes, it hit a lot of the beats of the comics. I was a big fan before this film came out. I was a big fan of Green Lantern, having started off with the Rebirth series all the way through War of the Light, and the entire story with all the Lantern Corps, the different colors, and basically, that was a long arc. So I got a lot of history on not only Hal Jordan, but the rest of the Lantern Corps, a lot of key Lanterns. So for the story, in my opinion, the story served its purpose. It let us know what all it was, who the Guardians were, how the suit works, how everything comes into play, why these peacekeepers are here. They did a lot of history in the opening scene when Hal Jordan finally accepts the ring and gets taken to Oa. They show the introduction process to him gaining the knowledge of the Lanterns, his ring becoming fully functional. He gets tossed into training, etc. The story hit all the points it needed to start this universe. I think people put too much pressure on the fact that it needed to be something huge. So usually when people have the intention of starting a franchise, the critics come from all, forms of life. They come from the woodwork, they come from left field, they come from everywhere. The critics just seem to always show up when it comes to something, IP, a property that everyone has attachment to, or for the most part is a well-known property. That's when all the critics come out. So story-wise, were there any mess-ups? I would say yes. Did it hurt the movie to the point that it was a horrible film, unwatchable? By no means is it a horrible film, and by no means is it unwatchable. It's very passable. To me, I felt like it was a good enough movie to give us the rest of the franchise, to jumpstart the rest of the franchise. And ironically, a lot of the complaints people had towards it fit in with the MCU mode. Understand, this was 2011. Iron Man came out in 2008. By the time 2011 came around, we were probably still just about to see a Captain America. So he wasn't even at the Avengers level yet. So the quality of MCU movies wasn't even there yet. They weren't boundary pushing like some of them are now. The Green Lantern actually set the tone for what movies would be for the next 10 years. Because the comedic element, the grounded on, Earth feel, and a lot of things they did in that film, a lot of ways that they created that film, MCU seemed like it was influenced by it a little bit. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But I definitely see a lot of influence from Green Lantern to other movies in MCU. So, in short, I feel like it did serve its purpose. The story, did have flaws. Those flaws, again, tie to the villains. They tie to the antagonists. And like I said, it's not make or break, but I feel like they needed maybe 20 more minutes of the film to really stretch the story out and put everything in place. Build up Hector Hammond a little bit more as a villain. Even though I saw him for what it was, he was really just a catalyst to have Parallax be an enemy on Earth until the final battle where it's really Jordan and the Lanterns versus Parallax. So my second issue would be, again, with the villains, would be Parallax. Now, I won't say it was completely done wrong, but the gas cloud thing was done. They tried that in the Silver Surfer Fantastic Four movie, and we didn't enjoy Galactus as a gas cloud then. I think they should have learned from that film and knew not to give us a giant gas cloud as an enemy. With that being said, not the entirety of Parallax form was a gas cloud. You do see his face. You do see structures. But for the most part, he was a giant gas cloud coming from another place in the universe with the original intention of attacking Oa, but with Hammond being the one tasked to observe Al-Mansur's dead body, he eventually gets infected with the yellow fear energy that Parallax is in control of. So a piece of Parallax essentially was corrupting Hammond, which led to Hammond going crazy, being mutated, gaining powers, and opposing Hal Jordan on Earth. When those two finally met in their battle, Hammond reads Hal Jordan's mind, sees all the information, his interactions with Carol, the fact that it's Hal, and Hal kind of does the same thing, puts his lantern ring on Hammond, who's possessed by Parallax, which instantly gives Parallax the knowledge that Al-Mansur's ring found a replacement. So he redirected his attention on Earth, getting rid of Hal Jordan to then have a better chance at assaulting Oa. Now, it's not a bad thing, but it just doesn't make sense that they would allow Parallax to go from one end of the universe, reach Earth, to then maybe Hal Jordan gets it done. The Guardians, in the comics, the Guardians typically don't make the best decisions. They usually put people in situations where they end up facing the adversity instead of avoiding the situation altogether. Then again, the Guardians in comics, and like they explain in the movie, the Guardians are tied to the beginning of the universe. They literally were here at the beginning of time. They were tasked with making sure the universe was run properly, that it wasn't corrupted. Every color, every form of energy is a different emotion. So Green Lanterns are basically on the emotional spectrum. Green being the power of will, yellow fear, red rage, etc., etc. So my thing is the Guardians know this. Parallax was one of them. Parallax was a Guardian that wanted to show that they can use fear as a weapon as well, and that it wasn't a corrupt, they wouldn't be completely corrupted. It's something they can control. Obviously, that didn't work out, and he got corrupted, but they knew the power of this now corrupted Guardian who became Parallax. Why wouldn't you send an army of lanterns to nip this in the bud before he gained more strength? That's where the story kind of hits for me, because it's like, now I can agree, like, the criticisms that these people have as far as the story, I can agree with this part, because you have hundreds of thousands of Green Lanterns at your disposal. You're telling me you needed Sinestro to come and tell you, hey, Al-Mansur is dead. He says something about Parallax. Let me lead up. No, you're the Guardians. You should they were already aware, but they should have had something in place. Mind you, a lot of Green Lantern lore is tied to fate in the DC comics and the universe. So the Book of Oa, which was not referenced in this movie, actually has the past, the present, and the future of the universe. So a lot of this is written. Now, you would only know this fact if you followed Green Lantern comics, the War of the Light saga, all of that. That's how you would know this. But to the viewers watching Green Lantern for the first time, it's like, why are the Guardians just sitting on the tower, just not doing nothing? And then Sinestro's obviously the future villain. You got him leading this, and they instantly get wiped out, except Sinestro. Nothing tells you to double down. Just, you know what? Let it go to hell. That didn't make sense. So I agree as far as that. Again, it didn't make or break the story. The movie was passable. It was definitely enjoyable enough to look forward to certain things. Specifically, what I look forward to was pretty much Sinestro's involvement. So throughout the movie, you know, Parallax's whole being was because that Guardian who got corrupted thought he could harness fear energy to help the Lanterns on their cause. Essentially, Sinestro, before Hal Jordan saves the day and finally accepts responsibility as a man, and you see all that, Sinestro suggests to the Guardians that they should fight fire with fire, use fear against Parallax. So Sinestro tells them that he's going to harness the yellow energy. They're going to create a ring for the fear energy. You don't see that throughout the rest of the movie. It's an end credit where you see him finally finish the creation of the yellow Sinestro Corp ring, and he puts it on. You see the energy turn his suit from Green Lantern to Sinestro Corp yellow. You see the yellow energy affect his eyes and that evil presence. That was the biggest story thread that I was like, I can't wait for a part 2. I can't wait to see the continuation of the story. But it never happened. Now, why did it happen? Besides the, some of the reception, the critical feedback of the movie, the budget was about $160 million. They only broke off with about $200 to $220 million, if I'm not mistaken. But after advertising costs and promotion, they didn't even make half of what they put in. So, I can understand why they stopped the universe. But I feel like they should have doubled down, expanded on the good elements of the movie, and fixed the parts of the movie that were wrong. So, what needed fixing? Just really the villain element. And by the second film, we would have had Sinestro. And the person they chose to play Sinestro, which was Mark Strong, was actually perfect in his role. When I put these questions out on the boards on the internet, the first thing people said that they loved about the film was Mark Strong as Sinestro. So the second film or trilogy or whatever you wanted to lead to after this, you already had a strong antagonist and protagonist in Sinestro and Hal Jordan. They should have doubled down. They should have gave us a part 2. Now, besides some of the story elements and the complaints of, Hector Hammond and Parallax, another issue was, besides Hector Hammond and the issues with Parallax, the only other complaint I really saw as far as characters go was Amanda Waller and the handling of her. I think people are confused that she was killed off in the warehouse scene. She was actually saved by Hal Jordan, so there is a chance of Argus, Checkmate, or the Suicide Squad down the line in this specific universe. So what's the biggest issue? The biggest issue was the CG, according to a lot of people. And let's rewind time, 2011. This was prime CG technology at that time. Looking back now, it's like, it does hold up, but it doesn't. Like, it's kind of cartoony in certain scenes. You can definitely tell this is a fake suit. Like, there's nothing here, like no texture. But look where the idea of a completely CGI suit brought us. Zack Snyder did Zod's suit completely CGI. Batman and Superman's capes are completely CGI. It's possible to do it, but you got to understand the time frame that this was done. The CGI wasn't as powerful as it is nowadays. With that being said, I, again, don't think this was make or break for the film. Another thing that I've heard was complaints about the constructs that Hal Jordan was using throughout the film. Now, to me, this is a ridiculous criticism because if you actually know Hal Jordan in the comics, Hal Jordan always had the simple constructs, the baseball bats, simple things. He wasn't known for the complexity of his constructs. He was known for his leadership and having the most will to get things done. He's the first Earth Lantern. That's what makes Hal Jordan prominent as opposed to the other Lanterns. Now, if we're talking about Kyle Rayner is an artist in real life. So his constructs are extraordinary. We haven't had Kyle Rayner in a movie. We need Hal Jordan to even get to Hal Rayner. So the complaint of his constructs really doesn't make no sense. And if you really knew who Hal Jordan was as a Green Lantern, as a character, you know that the constructs were actually true to character. Things like the brick wall when he was fighting Sinestro, those were used in other properties like the Mortal Kombat games, the DC Injustice games. Those are actual moves in the game. So a lot of his constructs seem limited to people's, what other people thought, hey, I would have did this or I would have did that. I mean, what you would think in the moment is not what Hal Jordan's thinking. We're literally in Hal Jordan's first ever Green Lantern film, the first ever Green Lantern film, period. We have to stay true to character. And his constructs, whether they were extraordinary or not, they were true to character. They gave threads of Carol Ferris and showed her codename being Star Sapphire, which is another, color on the emotional spectrum, pink or lavender, I believe, which is the power of love. So they had a lot of universe buildup in this film. So they should definitely continue on, push forward. If this cameo is true, if these rumors of Ryan Reynolds coming back are true, then I'm definitely excited. I feel like the Green Lantern franchise wasn't a complete letdown. They should have definitely tried out a second film. There have been a lot of worse films in history. Just check the X-Men franchise. They don't even know what timeline they're in. So I think people would have gave Green Lantern 2 a shot. And I know Ryan Reynolds over the years have joked about being a completely CGI suit or threw shots at, Warner Brothers for the reception of Green Lantern. But I know more than anything, he'll probably want to redeem his Hal Jordan in his eyes or redeem the Green Lantern franchise in his eyes. It's not easy being tasked to be the front runner, the leader of this franchise and eventual universe they wanted to build. Sometimes not easy. Not everyone gets the perfect characterization or perfect, writing like Robert Downey for Tony Stark. So I believe, Zack Snyder has a great vision for how these characters should be portrayed on film. So if they are going back to Green Lantern and they are doing a completely CGI element to the suit, this time around I definitely have a lot more faith. Now, there is an extended version of this Green Lantern film. I really can't tell you the differences between the standard and the extended because at this point I have the extended edition, and that's, what basically I'm giving this review based on. But I don't feel like the film was horrible enough to completely, forget about the franchise. Now, like I said, we got these renewed talks. We have Green Lantern Corps being repurposed as a television episodic based show on HBO Max. So we have a lot of Green Lantern news coming up in the future. We have DC Fandom in August. Hopefully they reveal a little bit more about that. But I can for one say, if you did not watch Green Lantern 2011 at all, or if you felt like it was completely trash or you didn't give it a fair shot because of critic reviews, I would say go back and watch it. It's a decent watch. It's not the greatest of superhero films, but it's definitely not the worst. It hits a good middle ground where it's passable. You kind of want more. And, for the most part, you can just enjoy what they did do with it. Green Lantern is definitely a great IP, and I really hope that they reinvigorate this franchise. Like I said, go back, watch it, give your own opinion. I will always encourage people to give to mistake in other people's opinions. We give you these reviews so we can either encourage you to go find out for yourself or pre-warn you that this might not be the epic or the classic that you would have wanted. So go watch Green Lantern 2011. Give it another chance. Hopefully I've changed your review or reinforced your review. Either way, we should probably take in these old movies and rewatch them and get a fresh, refresher on these films, because they might end up in the DCEU anyways. So the person behind the screenplay and who produced this film was Greg Berlanti, which is responsible for the entirety of the Arrowverse, the CW universe. So technically we can, regardless if we didn't enjoy, or some people didn't enjoy his 2011 Green Lantern film, we still gotta tip our hat and applaud this man, because he gave us Green Arrow, Legends, Supergirl, Flash, Black Lightning, so many heroes, so many crossovers, and the most ambitious crossover yet. Brought all these franchises together, brought all these movies together, all these TV shows together. We wouldn't even be talking about Ryan Reynolds and Green Lantern 2011 in 2020 if it wasn't for Greg Berlanti. Now, in Crisis on Infinite Earths, last year's crossover, they actually incorporated, they showed the Green Lanterns as a universe in Crisis on Infinite Earths, which also, like I said earlier, brought in the DCEU. So it's all connected. Guys, go get a refresher. Watch this movie. Thank you for listening in. Final review, if I have to give it a number, I'd give this movie a good, honest, like 7.5 out of 10. Mainly for, the shoddy CGI didn't hold up in this, year. Some movies do, some movies don't. It didn't make a break, like I said, but it was an issue. Parallax's gaseous form and, just the handling of Hector Hammond, I felt like we needed a little bit more story elements to justify Hector Hammond's importance in the story, outside of being the one who worked on Omnisor and signaled Parallax to arrive to Earth. He was basically plot armor. So that's why it's a 7.5. But go watch this. Hopefully we get more news about Ryan Reynolds. Hopefully we get more news on Green Lantern Corps. This has been the Kayatic Dreams Podcast. This is AJ, your host. Please like, follow, and give me some comments. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you want me to review going forward. Listening, I'm watching everybody's responses to a lot of these things. So please feel free to chime in. This has been AJ, and this has been Kayatic Dreams Podcast.